What's going on, guys and gals? My name is Shadox and this video is powered by EA Game Changers. Now, part of the Game Changer program is to give feedback and point out issues with the game when they appear, and that's exactly what this video is about. And so today, I want to talk about one of the new maps coming out in July, Marita. It's an infantry-only, close quarters, and very linear map that's a lot of fun to play. But there are some major issues that I feel need to be addressed before the map is released. Namely, the layout of the map favors one side, and this may result in frequent lopsided matches in favor of one team. So what do I mean by this? Well, there are three main issues that I can see so far: terrain placement, structures, and transports. Before we get started, a quick note. I'm going to be referencing the map overview screen a lot in this video. I've put a link to the best image that I have of the map overview so that you can get a good look for yourself and see some of the stuff that I'm talking about. I'm going to have actual gameplay up in the video as much as I possibly can to show you some of this stuff in action, but I will still pull up the map screen to highlight key points during the video. So let's start out with terrain, and how I feel that the British team are at a disadvantage on this map. If we take a look at the map, we can see that Marita is a sort of horseshoe shape, where the British team starts on the north end and the Germans on the south. Now there are 6 flags on the battlefield. Ideally, at the start of each round, each team should be able to control 3 flags before the major fighting begins. The Germans holding A, B, and C, and the British controlling F, E, and D flags. However, the time that it takes for each team to get to the middle 2 flags is vastly different, at least for my limited playtime on the map at EA Play. There are a couple reasons behind this. First is the placement of the roads that lead to the middle points. If I highlight the roads here on the video, you can see that the Germans have longer but much easier paths to follow from their spawn to the middle of the map. There is very little terrain that obstructs the transport vehicles, and the roads have very shallow curves. This makes high speeds possible with the jeeps or half tracks. Now, if we contrast this with the British team, you will immediately notice that the British have to go through the town at Echo first, before they are able to move on to the middle 2 objectives. The town is not easy to navigate for some transports, as the half-tracks do not turn well, and the universal carriers are a pain to drive in a straight line, let alone around corners. There is a lot of clutter in the town that can hinder movement as well. Small walls, buildings, and rocks are everywhere, whereas the Germans have much more smooth and rolling terrain that can be avoided or even driven over with ease. It's the same story for infantry. The town is not on level ground, and the area of the town is terraced, and so if you are not on the roads, you'll have to constantly stop your movement, climb up a wall, and then continue on. This adds a lot of time in moving from one objective to the other. The cliff face here, just outside of Charlie, is a huge issue as well, due to its location and shape. The German team can push along this rock face and have lines of sight that cut off the British team from safe access to Delta. There is a low-lying path that the British can take, but let's compare this to the 2 safe paths that the Germans can take from Charlie to Delta, with support from their friends at the rock face and fully covered from any British lines of sight. The Germans can take the middle valley or the covered cliff face all the way around to Delta. The additional lane gives the Germans a huge advantage of mobility between the middle 2 points, which are the most important since Battlefield uses a majority system for its scoring. Going back to the rock face, any Germans here have the ability to shoot directly at the buildings on Echo, but the reverse is not true. If the British were to control the rock face, they still can't see the majority of the capture area of Charlie, which is underneath and downhill of the bridge. So what changes would I make to start addressing some of these issues? Well, one stipulation that I want to hold myself to in this video is that any changes that I suggest must be minor changes. The map is already fairly far in development, and expecting major changes is simply not realistic, and it's not really useful for you, EA, or DICE to take into account either. The first change is to adjust this intersection here, allowing the British to drive straight along the cliffside instead of heading into the town. If you follow the straight path currently towards Echo, you can see that it curves around and makes a sharp turn right before you get to the objective area. People will always feel that the straight path is the fastest. It's something that we're hardwired into thinking, and so if we take this into account, the transport vehicles will most likely follow the straight path at first, and this will result in them arriving at the objective areas slower as a result. This doesn't change the actual distances. Instead, it more plays towards people's behavior. It will change the average travel time for the player, especially for those who are not familiar with the map layout. The second change is to adjust the shape of the cliff face just outside of Charlie. I would make the British side more convexly rounded, and the German side would be cut out, concavely rounded, sort of like a crescent. The Germans would still be able to watch the top lane into Delta. They would not be able to hold the lanes out of Echo, cutting off the British team. On the rock face currently, there are also a lot of small rocks and boulders that people can hide in between to peek over the corner at the moment. And so I would make the cliff face much steeper and cleaner, preventing anyone from laying in between two boulders, making them impossible to see. These changes would be fairly simple, as they are small terrain manipulations, instead of completely redesigning movement lanes or assets. But this is only the first issue. Now let's discuss the second, structures. If we back off the middle two flags and take a look at Echo and Bravo, what is the key difference? The most obvious answer is the sheer difference in number of buildings on and around the points. Echo has over 10 buildings surrounding the points, and let's compare this to Bravo's 4 buildings. These buildings act as key points for hiding and preparing to attack a point, as well as serving for somewhat safe areas to spawn in for defenders. Both objectives only have one building to hide in on the capture area, so that's not an issue. But think about this. If you were the last member alive in your squad, and you were trying to capture one of these enemy objectives, where would you hide? Bravo has a couple of buildings, sure. Echo has an entire town. Good luck finding a spawn beacon when you have to clear over 10 buildings. That one squad attacking Echo can distract so many players, it'll allow their team to push forward with far less resistance. Another major issue that arises from this imbalance is the lanes that are shut down in the event of the flag being captured. Suppose the German team controls points Alpha to Echo. How would a British squad get past them to break into Delta or Charlie? They can't, other than relying on luck to scrape by. Now let's flip that. What if the British controlled Foxtrot to Bravo? Well, the Germans can take the cliff side to the north of the point, straight into Charlie. It's much further away from Bravo, and it provides a lot more cover and concealment than the lane alongside Echo. Solving this issue is a bit trickier given my self-imposed restriction of keeping changes simple. This would rule out adding more buildings onto Bravo or taking some away from Echo. So instead, I think the best solution would be to increase the capture area of Bravo to compensate. I would extend it slightly to the southeast to include this building here, as currently this building doesn't really serve any real purpose. The last issue isn't specific to Marita itself, rather it's something shared by all maps, and also hinges on the first point where we talked about terrain, and that is the transport vehicle options available to each faction. Let's ignore the half tracks on both sides, as they have fairly similar handling and speeds. My focus is on the smaller and faster transports, the Opel Blitz and the Universal Carrier. The German car is extremely fast and handles fairly well with corners and terrain. The Universal Carrier, on the other hand, is slow and has a tendency to spin out of control whenever you run over a small rock. When it comes to getting to the middle points first, the Germans have a clear and distinct advantage in this category, as the Jeep can take those smooth turns that we talked about earlier like a champ. And by the time the German team can get an Opel all the way to Delta, the British are barely making it to Echo. Now, there isn't a whole lot that we could do other than removing the light transport vehicles altogether, as they're really only useful at the start of the map for rushing points, as trying to get a vehicle with no protection through a group of infantry is nearly impossible. The two half-track variants could still remain. It's faster than going on foot and still somewhat useful after the first 30 seconds of the game. Of course, the tractor should still remain for the memes, but I think removing the Opel and the Universal Carrier would only benefit the balancing of this map. I think this easily meets our criteria of keeping our fixes simple. And since the first few minutes of each match are the most important, it could have a larger impact than you might think. Now don't get me wrong on this video. I love Marita. I had an absolute blast playing it. However, even from my limited time playing with the map at EA Play, I was keenly aware of the possibilities that would occur when the map goes live. Most of the rounds that I played with the other game changers had about 40 to 50 active players, not the 64 that we can expect during a live match. I don't want this map to be hated on release because it's unbalanced and will likely result in all caps nearly every time. Now I don't know for sure if that is what would happen, but I'm concerned, and I think the points I brought up in this video should make you somewhat concerned as well. Again, the purpose of this video is to provide simple, constructive feedback and solutions for the problems that the map provides. If these issues can be addressed, then I have no doubt that Marita will be a fan favorite when it is released in July, as part of the 4th chapter of Tides of War. I would love to know if you have any suggestions, criticism, or feedback on my ideas. I always read the comments, so let me know if you do. Thank you guys for watching. My name is Shadox, and I hope to see you on the battlefield.